Today on Stronger Than Reason, we'll dig into the first two EPs from Nine Inch Nails, Broken and Fixed. Welcome to Stronger Than Reason. So, the last time I talked about Nine Inch Nails was way back in episode 8. I talked about their debut album, Pretty Hate Machine. Maybe unlike every other band I've talked about so far, I was actually a fan of Nine Inch Nails pretty much from the beginning of their career, so it makes sense to me to tackle their releases in order. And to recap slightly, I first heard that album in the summer of 1990. My friends and I all became fans right away. We'd been listening to a lot of industrial like Skinny Puppy, Ministry, Nights of Reb, and a lot of alternative post-punk in general. And the thing we loved about Nine Inch Nails was that it was hard-hitting but also accessible. It kind of added a pop sheen to the industrial sounds that we liked. You could hear the vocals. They were just concrete enough for you to get the gist. It wasn't all arty and abstract. The sound was aggressive, but it was a blend of rock and electronics. So it had more guitars than Front 242 or Nights or Ebb, and it wasn't as sample-heavy and as experimental as, say, Skinny Puppy, and it was a wee bit poppier than Ministry. And it was pretty clear even then that this guy, Trent Reznor, was amalgamating all the cool aspects of the other music that we were listening to and just making it a bit more palatable for the masses. But it still had an edge, and we were all for it. We were fans. So like I said before, that winter when we heard that he was playing a gig in a nearby big city, we braved a snowstorm to make sure we were there, and it was awesome. And as a four-piece, they recreated most of the tunes from Pretty Hate Machine, plus two new ones. There was a cover of Get Down, Make Love by Queen that would later show up on the Sin single, and something that we later learned was Suck by Pigface, a tune that's relevant to our discussion today, as we'll see. So seeing them live just cemented our fandom. We dug their weird Mad Max get-up and Trent's emo screaming, and the power of those tunes once they were beefed up in a live setting with real drums and guitar. So after that, going home and listening to Pretty Hate Machine again, it didn't really seem to be enough. Even the singles started to sound tinny and bleepy compared to what we heard at the show. The songs were just evolving, so over the next year, we'd see Trent collaborate with Uncle Al Jorgensen of Ministry on the release of Get Down, Make Love as a B-side to Sin, and we'd see him on Pigface's first album, which explained where the song Suck came from. So we figured things were looking up for him. He was working with all the right people, in our opinion, and it boded well for whatever it was he decided to do next. But little did we know that things weren't going so smoothly for Trent. He found himself chained to a record label, TVT, that didn't understand what it was he was trying to do. They were happy with Pretty Hate Machine becoming an indie hit and wanted him to just repeat the sound on the next album, adding more radio-friendly pop tunes. But he wasn't really interested in repeating himself. He was in this for the artistic control, not just the fame and money. So his definition of success was different. And that's what causes conflict, folks. People wanting different things at different times. So to make a long story short, the two parties were just at an impasse. And it's funny to note here that TVT first made its mark in the industry by selling TV show theme songs. So TVT, which sounds cool as an acronym, actually stands for TV Tunes. And I remember seeing commercials for their Television's Greatest Hits LP during my after-school cartoons. So imagine how delighted they were to find that they had this up-and-coming alternative music star on such a short leash. Trent certainly wasn't pleased. He dug in and just refused to record any new material until they released him from his contract. Now, much has been said about this feud, and I'm not going to rehash the details here, but the TLDR is that things stayed that way until Trent made the acquaintance of Jimmy Iovine of Interscope Records, who ended up brokering a deal. So the band would leave TVT for Interscope, but TVT would retain some publishing rights. And going forward, Jimmy would give Trent full artistic freedom. Nothing would go out as Nine Inch Nails without Trent's approval. And even more so, Trent asked for and received his own imprint, Nothing Records, that would allow him to release music by other artists at his own discretion. So, fortunately for us fans, Trent hadn't been idle during this period. He had been secretly recording some music with Flood under a variety of assumed names in studios across the U.S. And I don't know what names they recorded under. I'm sure it was really amusing, but I hope at least one of them was Blue Harvest. It turns out, though, that Trent had some angst to get rid of. So, in looking for new material, he turned toward his hatred of his record company, and he recorded what he later referred to as an ultra-fast chunk of death. Now, keep in mind, too, that as fans, we were expecting Pretty Hate Machine 2.0, maybe with Al Jorgensen on guitar or some of the Pigface folks, just to establish like solidarity with the scene or maybe a nod to his mentors. I mentioned last episode that I was all over Rec Music Industrial on Usenet around this time, at the expense of my studies, of course. And as I recall, word on the street was that Trent was working on some new material, but we all figured it'd be the second album, because that would only make sense, right? But one of the things you have to love about Trent is that he doesn't always do the predictable thing, and that makes him and his band interesting. And you can imagine how shocked we were that what turned up was not an album after all. It was this EP called Broken. And I remember that it came out in September 1992 because I had just started school in the big city. And, fan that I was, I had to trek down to my local Sam Goody to buy a copy of the new Nine Inch Nails on cassette. Now, at this point, I was a poor college student with one of those combo stereo systems that were all over the place in the early 90s. Do you know what I mean? It had like an AM/FM radio receiver sort of on the top layer, and then below that was a dual tape deck, and it had a turntable on top too. So like those three things all in one unit. And I can't really remember any specifics about this thing. I don't remember what model it was or anything, but it was really, really cheap. And the important thing was that it had no CD player. And I don't even remember what I used for speakers. I think I might have stolen some old stereo speakers from my dad. But remember, I didn't want to buy this stuff on vinyl because my turntable sounded like crap. And also, vinyl didn't always have all the cool extra tracks that were coming out around that time. Like, believe it or not, the industry was shifting to this other format. As a longer format, they could put more material on it. So, at the risk of repeating myself, my friends and I were highly motivated to get CDs around this time. And I was just slower than most, but, I didn't really have my act together to get a proper CD player. That would come later in a few months, as we'll see. I know CDs are heresy these days. I know that any true fan would get all these releases on 180-gram virgin vinyl, with the collectible gatefold. And that's totally true, fine enough. But, I shelled out enough for these releases as it is, buying them on all these different formats. I am not enough of a collector fetishist to buy them a third or fourth time at this point in my life. And I've said that many times, and something I'll probably have to continue to say in this show. But yeah, I bought the cassette of Broken. I still have that cassette somewhere deep in my archives. And by archives, I mean my crawl space. And if you think I'm going to dig around in there just for this show, what with all the cat litter, spiders, and radon, you got another thing coming. Yeah, I did that for my Art of Noise tape. I took a spelunking mission in there. But that was only because I didn't own the CD. I do have the Broken CD, as you see here. So this is what I'm showing. So what was the reaction to Broken back in the day? Well, as I recall, it was one of pleasant shock. For one thing, this record wasn't synth pop the way Pretty Hate Machine arguably was. So anyone who was really into Nine Inch Nails because they filled a dance floor was pretty bummed out by this release. Of course, we'll get into the details, but it was clear that the band had evolved into something bigger, heavier, and more aggressive. And maybe some of this was due to the enrockification that I mentioned last time, due to grunge pushing every band in that direction. But personally, I think it had more to do with Trent just needing to blow off steam. This record was a catharsis for him, or maybe it was a bit of each, with those two factors lining up or synergizing to just bring us a bigger, badder Nine Inch Nails. The other thing that stupefied us on RMI was this format. It was an EP, it wasn't an LP, But the kicker to us, the coup de grace, was that we quickly discovered that it had 2 hidden tracks. So beyond the 6 tracks listed on the sleeve, there were 2 more. And on my cassette, they were way at the end of side 2, which was otherwise blank. So do you remember intelligent fast forward? So the tape deck would fast forward until it detected a signal on the tape. So that's what I had to do on side B. It would just spin through 3/4 of the tape before stopping and then playing those 2 tracks. And, I don't know, I didn't really think about that until trying to remember back to that whole experience of playing Broken on my tape deck. And it's kind of fun to think back about these hardships that we had to suffer in the old days prior to digital technology. But yeah, there were a lot of formats. So on vinyl, the bonus tracks came in a separate 7-inch record tucked away in the sleeve. And on the CD, it really depended on which edition you had. Early versions bundled the 2 bonus tracks on a separate 3-inch CD, which I'm sure was great fun on CD players that couldn't handle a 3-inch CD. And later versions like this one here had just a single 5-inch CD disc with the main content on tracks 1 through 6, followed by 91 tracks of just 2 seconds of silence each, and then the bonus tracks on 98 and 99, which I'm sure was great fun on CD players that would only sequentially skip tracks, taking 5 minutes to click through all those things. Now, these tracks weren't really named anywhere on the sleeve, but if you looked really, really close, which I did, you would see some credits printed in Fly Spec 2 down here at the bottom of the credits. And they say 7 written by A. Ant and 8 written by T. Resner / Pigface. So some of the cooler members of Rec Music Industrial quickly sussed out that track 7 was a cover of the song Physical by Adam Ant. And track 8 was Trent's version of Suck, which he had originally written and recorded with Pigface the previous year. So 2 covers, if you will. Later, Trent would explain the packaging by saying that he had made these recordings as part of the Broken sessions, but really didn't think they fit in since Broken was more an expression of pure rage. So it made sense to package them separately in some way. Now, RMI, at this point being mostly composed of trolls, mama's boys, and mouth-breathing troglodytes, we quickly parodied the wide variety of formats and releases and posts that started out as mildly amusing but quickly took on a legend of their own. And if there's anybody listening now who remembers what BFPT stood for, cheers to you. I'm not going to say any more than that. But yeah, Broken came out in all these different formats I mentioned and probably a bunch more that I don't even recall. Another subject of our speculation was the artwork itself, the sleeve. Overall, I could sum up the design aspects as lowercase, and by that I mean it was one of those releases that would just forego capital letters anywhere on the sleeve, and this was a trend at the time, a nod toward minimalism. It would become especially popular among certain electronic bands to have your front cover be some colorful thing with no type at all, and then your album details would appear in some teeny tiny thin Helvetica font, all in lowercase on the spine and the back, and it was a whole style. Trust me, I think Peter Saville broke this kind of ground in factory records in the 80s, and other designers kind of followed this very ultra-clean design. But Broken obviously didn't buy into that completely because the front cover has words on it. So it has a great big lowercase n, the band name, and the title, so not terribly minimalist. And of course, on the inside, this whole thing folds out, and we have some variations on that theme. We sort of saw this new version of the NIN logo, now in lowercase. And then when there were questions about this orange color, what was it exactly? Was it flame? It certainly reminded us of flames, but word on the internet was that it was actually black and white photos of very horrific things overlaid and rendered in red and yellow. And, sort of like a new take on the cover to Ministry's The Land of Rape and Honey, which was, in fact, something very horrific indeed, but shot in such a way that it looked very benign and abstract. So, of course, we squinted at Broken, and we were turning it around and peering at it for hours, trying to figure out exactly what this was. And as far as I know, No one has ever solved that. So if you know what it is, please speak up. Teach me something about that. But I think that's just one mystery we never got to the bottom of. This 3-panel digipack thing here was one of the formats it came out on. I think it also came out in a jewel box and maybe a few other approaches too. And I remember there was some criticism about the digipack in particular, the fact that it would get all scuffed up. I don't know. Does anybody out there remember Al Crawford? He was this fella on RMI that used to do a lot of music reviews. He he did some really entertaining reviews, but I remember he did not like the digipack. But yeah, the way it folds out like that, I don't think any of us had seen that quite like that before. So it was sort of unique. But there was also some interesting things way down in the credits. So on this panel here, he has a list of people he's thanking, you know. And then down here towards the bottom, it says, "No thanks. You know who you effing are. The slave thinks he is released from bondage only to find a stronger set of chains." And that was a head scratcher at first until we realized the bigger story about Trent switching labels. So that was a mystery for a while too. And on the back sleeve, we could see that this thing not only said TVT Records, but it also had Interscope. And then this thing here, Nothing. We didn't know what Nothing was at the time, and we all wanted to figure that out. And eventually it came out, probably in the press, and then somebody posted it to RMI, that Nothing was Trent's new imprint within Interscope. And Broken just happened to be the first release. So soon enough, that was proved out, and other bands would come out on Nothing, like Marilyn Manson, Coil, Square Pusher, Autechre, and many more. So let's talk about the music. Like I said, is just 6 tracks plus 2 bonus tracks, and 2 of the 6 are these fairly quiet instrumentals. So the first track is Pinion, and this might be the shortest Nine Inch Nails song ever at just over 1 minute. And what it is really just some repeated power chords that get louder and louder, and the second half adds some more like atmospheric samples and things in the background. But Pinion is more or less just an intro for the first real song, which is Wish. Of course, this is now a Nine Inch Nails classic. It's been played live more than any other song besides Head Like a Hole. It immediately starts with some jackhammer drums interspersed with blasts of noisy guitar. And it made it clear right away that this was not going to be the next iteration of Kinda I Want To. And if the music weren't enough to just sort of club you over the head, the vocals were pretty intense. Lots of screaming and F-bombs. Enough to make you think, oh, okay, so it's going to be like this. It's a very heavy song. It's fast, hard, brutal. The credits say that Chris Vrenna and Martin Atkins added extra real drums to this track and also to the last one, which we'll get to. And you can hear those extra real drums because there's really nothing like extra real drums, in my opinion. And who knows why Martin showed up here. You know, maybe it was because of Trent's involvement in Pigface, which he co-founded. Or maybe it was as a favor, or maybe Trent lost a bet. All I know is that Martin still tells anyone who will listen that he was in the Head Like a Hole video, and props to him for that, I guess. But if you enjoy Martin Atkins and his antics, just as an aside, I would recommend checking out his book, Tour Smart. It's a pretty entertaining read, even if you don't intend to take your band on tour anytime soon. There's lots of helpful advice in here from folks on the Invisible Records roster. And this edition that I have came out like 15 years ago, so who knows how much of it is still something that would apply in this post-BitTorrent and COVID world, but it definitely has some funny stories in here, and it's about 1 million pages long. And if nothing else, you know, it'll help you appreciate how much actual work is involved to get a band off the ground. And if nothing else, it kind of taught me that there's a huge gulf between just making Ableton tracks in your mom's basement and actually being a professional musician. Of course, you know, these days you could certainly get lucky and bypass all of that just by going viral on TikTok and setting up a Patreon. I'm sure it's just that easy. What does Martin say about that? Not much. You're not going to find any TikTok and Patreon and Kickstarter advice in here, but it does mention MySpace, and who knows, maybe MySpace is due for a big comeback. Anyway, that was Wish. It did get some airplay, with various radio stations editing out the naughty bits. I seem to remember that they edited it with just bits of silence, which was pretty jarring, and of course just drew attention to that fact, which was kind of funny. It was also the only one of these tracks to have a video on MTV, at least at first, but we'll get to videos in a bit. The one thing I really like about this song is the line, 26 years and on my way to hell. And what I like about it is that Trent still sings 26 years when he does this live. And I kind of wish he would sing 58 years or whatever, though. I think it would be funny if he just kept updating the lyrics with his current age. Like, hey, everybody, he's 58 and he's still on his way to hell. So for now, let's go on to the next song, which is Last, which ironically isn't the last song. This is my favorite of the bunch, hands down. Now, why is that? So, two reasons. I like the funky guitar riffing, especially in the later part of the song. It's very KMFDM-like, in my opinion. And remember, KMFDM at this time had just come out with Money, so Sasha Konietzko was just starting to dig into the possibilities of unleashing Günter Schulze's riff machine. But the real reason I love this song is this, and it's really the only reason you need. It's the guitar solo that comes after the first bridge. And if you can't be bothered to listen to the first part of the song to find it, I'll just tell you now that the solo hits at 42 seconds in. It's very, very simple, but as I explained many times in this show, simplicity brings power. And that's the case here. And I defy you to find a better Nine Inch Nails guitar solo. This one will just blow you right out of your socks. And it's just like 6 different notes. Your mom could play it, and she probably did back in 92, the year she got the Nine Inch Nails logo tattooed on her ass. And good for her, because a lot of us did, and no regrets. Anyway, this solo is a real gem, and I just love it. And this tune, Last, for whatever reason, hasn't gotten much love from Trent. And as we'll see, he doesn't often play it live. I found on Setlist FM that it's the 66th most played Nine Inch Nails song. And I have no idea why, because it rocks just as hard as Wish. It's somewhat slower and slipperier, if that's a word. I think it grooves more. It's not a dance song, but it does have kind of a groovy feel to it, as some slower songs do. And I found a few live performances of this on YouTube, and, you know, all the comments suggest that the fans think the song is underrated, and I would have to agree. Lyrically, thematically, this song doesn't seem to express anger so much as maybe frustration, or explaining the nature of things, maybe, like with respect to a relationship of convenience, let's say. It's hard to say whether he had TVT or something else in mind here. It's probably one of those things that could fit a variety of situations, as all true art does. Anyway, this is another banger, and I dig it. And that goes into another instrumental interlude, which is charmingly titled Help Me, I Am in Hell. This is 2 minutes of a guitar melody that just gets more and more intense, and then ends with what sounds like wind blowing. But really, that's just kind of a breather before the real showpiece here, which is Happiness and Slavery. This is maybe the closest we come to a real pop song here. It's really aggressive and harsh, but it does have a distinct verse, bridge, and chorus section, and a completely different middle 8. And the bridge is probably the grooviest bit, where he sings, "Don't open your eyes, you won't like what you see." I think there are some shades of Pretty Hate Machine there, maybe. And overall, it's a pretty radio-friendly song. There's no bad words. It did have a video that was universally banned. Again, we'll get to the videos later. But yeah, to me, this tune harkened back to Pretty Hate Machine and was at least recognizable as being from the same band that gave us Head Like a Hole. It's just a tune in that vein, but it's been in rockified even more. And that goes into the final track of the main sequence, which is another super fast death chunk, Gave Up. This song is kind of a kitchen sink of awesomeness. It starts off with a drum part and what sounds like Trent singing through a bedroom fan, like you used to do when you were a little kid. And maybe some of us adults still do. I'm not judging here. But at the chorus, it pretty much just explodes into this crazy guitar blast with screaming, not unlike Wish. And now that you know what this track can do, it kind of cycles back into a quieter verse and, still intense with guitar riffing and sort of alternates back and forth. Really cool dynamics. And by the end, it just gets really noisy and intense indeed to close out the record. Definitely a contender for the most intense song in this EP, but you could probably make the same argument for the other 3 full songs, the ones with vocals. It's hard to say which one of those would win in a steel cage match. But speaking of steel cage match, let's talk about the videos. It turns out that Trent recorded videos for every song except Last, and again, with Last being the runt of the litter for some reason, being left out, not sure why that is, but these were not ordinary videos. They were organized into a single long-form music video with a framing story designed to emulate a snuff film, which is just delightful. Maybe this follows from Trent's experiences filming the video to Down in It, where legend goes they stuck a camera on a balloon and filmed Trent lying down covered in cornstarch, and after the balloon got away, some farmer found the camera in his field and called the cops because he thought it showed a murder. All of that is part of the Nine Inch Nails legend, of course. I don't know how much of that is true, but that's what we all thought and hoped was true. Wish is the only one of these clips that did make it onto MTV, and it essentially shows the band performing the song in a cage, surrounded by an angry mob, and at the end of the song, the mob breaks into the cage. That was by far the most pleasant of these videos, and I'm not going to get into the details of the videos here. It's all online if you care to look for it. You know, just about anything is really online, let's face it, if you care to look for it. And this sort of content might have been edgy and cool back in the early 90s. I don't know, because I was never edgy or cool. All I'm going to say about it now is that it's definitely not my thing. Maybe as a grown man who's gone through some real life experience and as someone who reads the news every day, I'm not really looking for entertainment that pushes those sorts of boundaries anymore. And absolutely can appreciate that Trent made this as an artistic statement, and I can appreciate that making these videos at all challenged his fans and critics alike, and I get that art should not conform to anyone's standards of morals or even basic decency, and that's all fine. That's absolutely true. But I'm just speaking for myself here, that all that doesn't mean I have to like it. And of course, this material is from a different time. These days, who needs it? I don't know. It's not me. That's all I can say. And I wonder how Trent feels about the broken video today. I really do wonder about that, especially as someone who has a family. But anyway, and I mean Trent there. So anyway, it's notable to me, regardless of the material, that it was Peter Christopherson who directed that whole thing. And, you know, it was that Peter Christopherson. There's a guy with a really full resume. You may know him as, you know, I don't know, a founding member of Throbbing Gristle, you know, the band that coined the term industrial music. Or you might know him as part of the Hypnosis design firm, along with Storm Thorgerson and Audrey Powell, the ones that designed the album sleeves for Pink Floyd. Pardon me, for Pink Floyd, among many others. Or you might know him as one half of Coil with John Balance. But regardless, that was his first collaboration with Trent. And we all noticed that he was listed as the director of Wish on MTV, and that was duly noted. He was someone who's highly respected in this industry. Maybe because they knew full well that none of the other videos were going to see the light of day. It just wasn't possible. They also filmed a second video for Gave Up, which was just a live performance in Trent's home studio. But of course, this wasn't just any home studio. This was in 150 Cielo Drive, the house where the Manson family killed Sharon Tate. And you younger folk might remember it, fictionalized in the recent hit film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But this video for Gave Up opens and closes with shots of the house, very intentionally giving it a cameo appearance. And it also features a young Marilyn Manson on guitar and backup vocals. And altogether, it's a really blistering version of the song. But without a doubt, I think it's more interesting by who's on screen and what. But yeah, this was the main EP. It was very short, just over 20 minutes. But what about those bonus tracks? They took up another 10 minutes or so and extended play to over a half an hour. And those tracks just fascinated everybody, maybe because they were mysterious at first, But I don't think any of the fans in RMI saw much of that before. Bonus tracks that were packaged separately. And it caused a lot of discussion. It definitely created a buzz, just fascinated everybody. But then the choices for tracks were interesting too. So Physical was a pretty straight rendition of the track by Adam Ant, which, if you haven't heard the original or if you haven't seen Adam Ant perform it live, I urge you to do that. I'd argue that the original live rendition by Adam Ant is just as powerful as Trent's, and I'm not hugely familiar with Adam Ant or his music. Yeah, I was quite young in that part of the 80s when he was sort of very popular, but I did find a new appreciation for him after digging into that tune. And I got to hand it to him. He's quite the showman, and it's just a really cool song. And I think it suited Nine Inch Nails very well, stylistically, kind of in the vein of Get Down, Make Love, being a great cover for Nine Inch Nails as well. And it's very similar. It's kind of a down-tempo rocker, much less noisy than the other tracks that are on the main disc of Broken. So I could see why he thought it might not fit in as well. Suck was not so much a cover, really, as much as just Trent's full realization of this track that he had written for Pigface. This is the version that he had in mind when he wrote it. And by Trent's account, the Pigface version was really just a sketch. And, of course, later on, playing live, Pigface would play it a lot closer to Trent's final version, probably under his direction. Or maybe this was a case where the song just evolved in Trent's mind over time, as songs do. And, what appeared on Gub was just a very early sketch. They just recorded it very hastily. I understand that album was sort of thrown together. If you read Chris Connolly's memoir, you'll get more information about that. I don't think they really gave any of those tracks time to develop. But anyway, the version on Broken has a much fuller arrangement. Like Physical, it's slower. There's plenty of slip and slide. Almost has a very funky bass line. But the chorus brings those Broken-era guitars. And as fans, we were pretty interested in the dynamics between Trent and Pigface, especially when Pigface later credited the song to whatever Trent says, no shit. I guess there had been a kerfluffle of sorts over who got credited. I don't know. When you look at Pigface's album Gub, it credits Reznor with Martin Atkins, Bill Rieflin, and Paul Barker. Maybe because the other three guys played the bass and drums on the record. I don't know. But I know the song is pretty nifty, and it rounded out the album nicely, or the EP, I should say. So what was the reaction? I remember that in addition to making fun of the various formats and track lists, some of the folks in RMI were offended that the album didn't stray far enough from its pop roots. The industrial fans in 92 were a bunch of jerks. We were pretty hard to please. And it wasn't enough for them that Trent reinvented this band and gave them a whole new sound and an edge to check out. And in their minds, I guess they were thinking, why did he even bother having recognizable songs? I mean, the nerve of this guy, calling himself industrial. This isn't industrial. This is a bunch of wimpy stuff. They had the idea that they were the ones, the fans, that had turned him into a star, and they were trying to get him to develop in a more industrial, experimental way. And, he repaid us by giving us this top 40 stuff like Happiness and Slavery. And people were, as they do, crying sell out from all corners. But, Trent surprised us once again. And strangely enough, this time I actually anticipated it. And I don't know why, but I remember imagining the cover of Broken being in different colors. And I may have mentioned before that I was a frustrated art nerd around this time, and I was, a guy who did a lot of drawing and painting and throughout high school and was sort of noted as being an artistic person. But I went to college and was forced to take engineering classes. What a rough life I led. But I was pretty into cover art, and I really liked the design of Broken. And I guess when it came out, I was imagining that maybe we'd see a single or something from it with a similar design, but maybe a different color. I mean, that's what you would expect, a single to come out from this major release, and maybe with a slightly different design aspect. And I figured it would probably be Wish because it was all over MTV at the time. Well, imagine my surprise when I walked into a record store one day and saw a blue version of Broken. And it was sitting under the counter, the glass counter on a shelf. And I just couldn't believe my eyes because it was exactly as I had imagined it. But it wasn't Broken, not quite. It was called Fixed. And it just made sense, of course. Like, you just, in retrospect, you're like, of course, he's going to have Broken and then he's going to have Fixed. Why didn't we see this coming much sooner? And after buying this CD for Fixed, which, by the way, was the first CD I ever bought, even before I had a CD player, because as soon as I saw this disc, I just had to buy it. I couldn't even listen to it, and I bought the thing. But I checked out the packaging, which there wasn't much to it. It was an even smaller, more modest digipack. But I saw this note on the back. This recording contains various interpretations of songs that appear in their proper form on the Broken EP. So, it was another EP of interpretations. Not really remixes, but interpretations. And it wasn't just a maxi single. So, for my friends and I, both on RMI and in real life, this was our first real experience with a remix album, or in this case, a remix EP. Though the interwebs now assure me that the first remix album was this thing by Harry Nilsson called Aerial Pandemonium Ballet, which he released in 1971. Who am I to argue with that? But this was the first one that we got into, being young whippersnappers, and to us it was just a mind-blowing concept. And after learning who did these remixes on here, or interpretations, Coyle and Jim Thirlwell, RMI was completely satisfied that the flaws that they perceived in Broken were in fact finally fixed. So everyone rejoiced in the noise and the experimentalism of it all. Though personally, I found the interpretation of Happiness and Slavery on here to be the real dance floor filler of this whole era of Nine Inch Nails. It was a pretty cool synth version of the song. So not so experimental is just pretty damn cool in my opinion. That was definitely my favorite track on Fixed. But the rest of these tracks are pretty interesting. I must have listened to Fixed 1,000 times, but I have to say I don't listen to it too much these days. I guess these days I'm more interested in actual songs. Again, I don't know. Tastes change as we get older. I've kind of had my fill of experimental who's-its and whatnots for one lifetime. But yeah, Fixed is 6 tracks again. 2 mixes of Wish, 1 of Gave Up, 1 of Happiness and Slavery, and 2 tracks that are more or less amalgams of different things, kind of like Franken songs, if you will. Trent here was just breaking all the rules. These were his interpretations, after all, not remixes. And, we were also kind of hoping there'd be a couple hidden tracks on Fixed as well, but no dice. Although I'm pretty sure that at least one of these tracks has a bit of suck in it. I just don't remember which one. But yeah, a pretty cool disc. And I was a happy guy once I bought a CD player and could actually listen to the thing. So, why do I love these records? I mentioned this several times, but I love how Trent started reinventing the band, its sound, its presentation, the graphics, the look, the way he surprised us and taught us to expect to be surprised, the way he was thinking out of the box, or into the digipack as it were, and the way he was starting to think of releases in sets or in pairs of releases, not just a single album orbited by a bunch of singles. And we liked that he was taking things in a more Ministry-esque, Mad Max kind of aesthetic that set us up perfectly for the true second studio album, which would drop like a bomb in 94 and would just take Nine Inch Nails to the next level of fame and notoriety. I love that Broken and Fixed kind of strengthen his bonds to the industrial and electronic community. We saw a lot of familiar names on here like Ministry, Flood, Coyle, Pigface, J.G. Thirlwell. And it seemed to us at the time that these genres were sort of coalescing into one big ecosystem, or maybe like a creature with many heads. There was a lot of collaboration going on among these different kind of industrial bands in the early 90s, and it was a really exciting time to be a fan. And to us, the possibilities just seemed endless. Unfortunately, Trent didn't tour Broken, which kind of bummed us out, but he would tour the next album, and I would be there to see it when he did, and that's a story I'll tell another time. But for now, there you have it, kids. Punch number 2 in Nine Inch Nails' 1-2 punch. Broken and Fixed. Trent's first related pair of releases, something that would become a pattern for him down the road, and maybe a pattern for the industry as a whole. Hell, this might have popularized the whole notion of a remix album. Don't tell Harry Nilsson I said that. But that's for now. You've been listening to Stronger Than Reason, episode 31. And as always, I thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed what you heard today, please consider subscribing or just telling me off in the comments. You know, people really seem to enjoy that. Until next time, take care, eat your vegetables, and stay strong.